Good evening, Heal with Gold, and I am here. I can't believe that I'm here, but I am here, and I'm so excited to see you all. So, actually, not see you, just see your comments, right? So, because I don't see you, you see me. So, it's very important that you approve StreamYard, and as you come in, you say hello. Hello, Marina. Always my first one. You must have been like the best student. And guys, as you come in, please say hello so I could see that you are here. I'm seeing that some people already coming in. I really thought I was going to cancel today. And it was very interesting because I went to look. I didn't remember because I was going so nuts. I didn't remember the title of today's lecture. And when I saw the title, I said that there is no way that I'm canceling because I need to hear this now more than ever. So I just want to update you because I did ask for prayers for my husband, and I'm so grateful. So I'm grateful for all the messages and the likes and the loves and the prayers and people who contacted me privately. He was not feeling well. Hey, Paul, he collapsed, and we got an ambulance to take him to the hospital, and he's extremely anemic. There's no COVID. Thank goodness he's in a floor with no COVID, and I was able, after much effort, get him a private room. And because I'm not allowed in the hospital, it has been 10 times harder than any hospital stay. I am literally the entire day on the phone advocating for him, and I'm really happy that I've accomplished quite a lot of things, including getting permission to send him some fresh homemade food, which they do not allow. They have security that opens any packages, and they check one by one, and they remove any food from inside. But I managed to get permission. I made him some fresh soup and prepared him a very nice, loving package, and he just told me that he's so happy. Paul. So we're now waiting for a lot of test results. So keep the prayers coming because we're not out of the woods yet. And without further ado, I am so happy to bring Wendy here with a message that I personally need to hear, and I hope that you do too. Welcome, Wendy.
Hi, Miriam. It's lovely to be on, and despite your husband's circumstances, you're very brave continuing on, and great you could get something through to him, because I know my own experience is how tricky hospitals can be with outside things coming in.
Yes. So, yes, it hasn't been easy, but I think they already know who they're dealing with. And you know what? I think they're a little scared of me, but that's okay. I told them that they don't need to like me. I just need to get my husband home better when he comes home than when I dropped him in. I said, that's my concern. You know, if you like me or not, I don't care. So
sounds fair.
You know, but Wendy, I think that it was from God that you were the one that had to speak today, because you know so much about dealing with health, dealing with prognosis, the fear, the unknown. And, you know, that is what I'm going through right now, because we don't know yet. We're trying still to discover. So it's uncertain times. And a lot of people in this group, they go also, there's a lot of stroke survivors. There's a lot of uncertainty. And sometimes the period of not knowing is worse than when you get the diagnosis, because once you get the diagnosis, you go into work mode. You know, what do I need to do? Yeah. But before, you don't even know what to do. Tell us your story. Share with us, you know, share your journey.
Yeah. Well, what you said is so true. And I was in that exact position in my late 20s. I had decided, I'd looked at my wedding photos, decided I needed to lose some weight. I was one of those women that did it afterwards, not beforehand. And I was doing well. I'd lost about 10 kilos, but I just didn't feel better. I actually felt worse, and I couldn't put my finger on why that was happening. And I remember one day I was working back late at work, and my car was parked in the car park next door. And when I got there, the lifts were broken. So I thought, well, I don't want to get stuck in the stairwell at night with no one around. So I'll walk up the car ramp. And it was about 7 levels of car ramp. And all I remember is touching the handle of my car, and then the next minute waking up on my back, looking at the car park ceiling with my bag everywhere and blood on my face and bruises. And I'd actually fainted and fallen alongside the car and kind of down and hit my head on the concrete bit that the car backs up to. And stupidly got in the car, drove home, which I know now not to do, but realised that something was going on here and I needed to get some help. So I wound up at the local doctor the next morning, and she was really good. She actually fast-tracked me through a bunch of specialists. And this was, just like you were saying, I didn't know what it was. So they'd say, well, we're going to get you to see, a brain neurologist. And now we're going to go and get you to see a cancer specialist. And every time they would send me to a new specialist, I thought, oh, maybe I've got cancer now. And I get all, looking up on the internet what that was going to be all about, and then they'd say, okay, maybe it's a brain thing. Oh, what will that be like? And I was quite panicky about what I was actually going to get. And then I ended up being told to go to one of the large hospitals here in Melbourne in Australia, and I was told I had 2 years to live unless I had a double lung transplant. And that was not something I was expecting at all. And they said on top of that, no children and a short life expectancy.
And you were in your 20s.
Yeah. I'd just got married with my husband, obviously, and we had bought our first home, and I thought things were kind of, going according to plan. I was a bit of a planner, and this just threw us for a loop, and we both burst into tears when they told us.
Wow. So did you get that transplant?
Yes, I did. It was a bit of a long journey to get there, though. They decided firstly they were going to try a few different drugs, mainly out of the States, new ones which they were testing to see if any of those would work. So I did that for probably about 18 months. And bearing in mind they told me I only had 2 years to live, I was getting a bit nervous that they were trying all these things first. And I tried all sorts of things. They even had me on Viagra at one stage. I had 3 Viagra tablets a day. And my husband, it was actually originally designed to open up your blood vessels. And that's when they discovered what it also does for males. It doesn't do the same thing for females, thankfully. But my husband used to have to go to the pharmacist and ask for the drugs, because they were very monitored back then. They were very new to the market. And she was a very good-looking Italian pharmacist, and she'd go, I have your drugs here, Mr. Jenkins, and we'd have a bit of a laugh about it. But, after a little while, they realised that was just keeping me alive. It wasn't actually fixing me. So they put me on the lung transplant list, and I waited about 22 months before I finally got the call.
Wow. So that whole time, you had to be very careful so you wouldn't pass out, right? Your life wasn't the same during that period of time.
No, well, that's right. There was lots of things that I had to be careful, because I didn't want to put too much pressure on my heart and my lungs. And even now, after I've had the lung transplant, there's lots of things that you have to be careful of. I'm still only at about 64% lung capacity, which is why I get a little flushed and red still when I'm talking a lot. As my husband says, it doesn't stop me talking. But you do have to be careful. And it's, the going through COVID and the pandemic's actually been really interesting, because a lot of the things which we were taught to do, like good hand hygiene and being careful around other people who might have certain illnesses and things, is something we've been, taught to do from early on.
Wow. Do you wear masks on a regular basis before COVID, or?
Not really. What I would do would be avoid places where there were going to be large crowds, where I wasn't sure how well people were going to be. So certain concerts, certain busy, crowded pubs, that sort of thing, I'm always a bit cautious because it only takes somebody coughing on me and then I usually end up, with catching that because my immune system's always really low because of all the drugs they have me on.
Right.
So, yeah.
We had a guest speaker, Sean Swerner. I don't know if you got to see his show, but you should definitely watch it. He had cancer twice. He was in a coma 1 year, but he has one side of the lungs functioning, and he climbed Mount Everest.
Oh, wow, that's impressive. Yeah.
And he climbed since he went to the North Pole, South Pole, and many other peaks. And he does it in the honor of all the cancer survivors. But he's so strong, and I mean, he says that a lot is in the mind. And I would be surprised if you also believe in the power of the mind.
I definitely do, and it was something I picked up early on in the piece because I remember a nurse when I was in the ward. So I spent about 2 weeks in ICU, and then they transferred me to the ward for a month. And one of the nurses in there said they can always tell the patients that are going to get out first. And I said, "Oh, how do you know that?" And she said, "Because they just act as if they're already left." She said the women start fussing with their hair and putting on lipstick, and the guys start focusing on what's going on in the world and just want to move on. And she said, whereas the people who are really struggling, all they can focus on is being in that hospital bed. It was a really interesting comment and made me think, you're right. That's true. It's what you focus on. That old saying where energy flows, so where focus goes and energy flows, that's, what will happen. So, I agree. Yeah.
Wow. So tell us, and then continue with your journey. I'm very curious to know where you were, because I read a little bit about your story and we shared with the group. I mean, you moved a ton, you changed careers multiple times. I did too with the careers, and I have to tell you, I'm starting to get tired with starting fresh, pivoting. I've been talking. You have to pivot with the pandemic, and I'm like, God, I'm almost done with my pivoting.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Well, my grandmother, she used to say to me, God only sends you what you can handle. It's one of, I suppose, from where I'm coming from. I was brought up to be a fairly resilient child. My dad, because of his work, moved a lot, and I ended up having 8 different school moves. And so you very quickly learn how to be friends with people and how to fit into new environments and to realize, I guess, understand the culture of where you are and try to fit in with that. And I think out of all the schools, I think there was only one where I had slight difficulty because it was right at the end of what we call here in Australia the primary school, sort of up to about age 12. And they'd all been together for like 6 years, and I came for the last term. So it was really hard to slot in there. But all the other ones, I made friends really easily. And even today, I'd have no qualms about going into a room full of strangers and striking up a conversation. That doesn't bother me. So you do pick up things from everything you go through. And I've done 20 house moves. Most people think I'm mad, but it's just part of that was while I was younger, and then part of that's just me wanting change. And my poor husband, he goes, "Can we just stay here for a few more years?" So we'll see. Yeah.
So have you lived only in Australia, or have you lived outside also?
Well, I actually lived in the States for a little while when I was little. Yeah. So when I was probably from about 5 to 6.5, that sort of age group, my dad was doing a Master of Science at Berkeley University. So we lived in Oakland for quite a while. Very diverse suburb. I think we call them primary schools, but the elementary school that we went to was a bit of an eye-opener, shall we say. But it was it was really good because it made me get immersed in culture really quickly and meeting kids from all sorts of backgrounds. And yeah, it was really good. And my mum actually got quite heavily involved with the Girl Scouts over there, and she set up the first African-American Girl Scout troop in the area as well. So it was a really interesting time. And then the other part, after I finished school, I went on a Rotary exchange to Finland. So I lived over in Scandinavia for a year as well. So that was another cultural shock. So yeah.
Okay, so tell us, what are you doing now? Tell us about your career, your job, because you did it was a big change, right?
Yeah, well, when I got my diagnosis, I was working at Shell, the petrol company, in human resources, and really enjoying it. Like, it was a great group of people, and I was learning so much. It was a great company to work for, and they were very good to me after I had my transplant, and just fitted into what I needed for months. And I suppose I got to a point where I realized that working in an office environment was not very conducive to my health, because, somebody would get sick and I'd come crashing down with whatever it was, or they'd cough behind me and then I go, oh no, I'll be out for a few days. So I ended up making the decision to leave, and I set up my own business initially. And did a bit of consulting work and a few different things like that. Really enjoyed it. And I was able to work from home, which I've been doing for the last 10 years. And I think that's made a really big difference to my health. Also made it very easy when we had lockdown here in Melbourne for 5 months. I just kept on as normal, and, I'm all set up at home to work. So that was good. And then over time, I started realizing that I needed to do a bit more self-help for myself, because I'd gone through a bit of a rough patch after I had the transplant and got quite depressed, and ended up being diagnosed with PTSD and severe depression, which is not uncommon with patients, because, you go through a lung transplant, people think you're fixed, but, you still have a lot of other issues. And the life expectancy post lung transplant is usually only about 7 years, and people don't realize that. So with hearts it's about 12, and I think with kidneys and livers it's more like around the 20, 25 mark. So so that was a lot to get my head around, and I really struggled with that for a while, and not having children while friends are having children, and also not being able to do the career I wanted to do. So I ended up getting some professional help with it, and started realizing I needed to take ownership of that myself, and realize that I needed to be stronger mentally. And that's what led me down the path of looking into resilience, which is where I am now. So it was a long journey.
Let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. Did they tell you that you're not allowed to have children because of the transplant?
It's sort of a combination of, because of the drugs which I'm on, I take about 23 tablets a day, and some of them, cause issues with, crossing the placenta, and will cause issues with the child. And also the underlying condition I had makes me very prone to having child bearing complications anyway. And I remember talking to the gynecologist person that I was, had as my normal person anyway, and she was very reluctant once she heard what I was diagnosed with, because she said the only person who'd ever died on her watch was somebody who had the same thing. So she said, oh, you've got a lot of issues anyway, let alone all the issues with the transplant. So and we did think about adopting and other things like that, but the adoption agencies rightly want to make sure the parents are going to be around. So telling them I only had potentially 7 years life expectancy was not a good pitch to have a child. So unfortunately that ended with them very politely saying no. And so Gordon and I just decided to embrace it, and we've got a very spoilt dog, and I've got lovely nephews, and we just make the best of what happens when you don't have children, which is when you can go out for dinner at the drop of a hat, or travel more, or whatever you want.
Sure. And I love the attitude at the end of the day, because when you embrace your situation, you start focusing on the good and not spend too much time dealing with what you don't have, with the losses. It was very interesting. I want to ask you about the whole concept of a time, of limited time, because at the end of the day, we know that we're all going to die. I mean, we all die, right? There's nobody that didn't die.
So we all do.
But the fact that we don't have a diagnosis like that, it's not a thought. But we could die today, tomorrow, right? We could not wake up in the morning. I mean, I even know people that just didn't wake up in the morning. So, but when somebody has a diagnosis like you, that's in the forefront of everything that you do in your mind. It's like a countdown.
Yeah, and it's a tricky one, because I agree that's what happened when I first had my diagnosis. I was very focused on that 7 years. It was like, I used to say it was like the sort of Damocles hanging over my head, you know, at any minute it was going to fall. And the issue with living that way is that it actually puts you into a state of fear, and actually puts you off doing certain things. It can also encourage you a lot too, but you know, for a lot of the patients, it can become this real thing. And one of the things which I really enjoyed doing, you know, and I will maybe go into this a bit later, but one of the things I did get involved with was helping set up a lung transplant foundation. And we help, you know, fund for research, advocacy, support and education. And one of the things I get to do is go to talk to the new patients and caregivers every couple of months and just share my journey. And often when I walk in, they think I'm one of the staff or maybe another caregiver. And I have to go, no, I'm a patient as well, and up to 14 years. And you see the hope that you know that comes from that, because they've been told so many times, 7 years. And when you say, oh, forget the 7 years, I know people who are up to 30, they're like, and you can see them leaning forward and they talk to, you know, their loved one and say, oh, maybe I will be around longer than 7 years. And it's such a nice thing to give people that hope. So yeah, I love, that's one of my favorite parts of doing the charity work.
You know, it's so obvious you are a thriver. I interviewed thrivers for 3 years. And it's very interesting because I took very copious notes about, I wasn't just interviewing, I was really doing a little bit of a research. I ended up writing a book about the 10 commonalities between all these women that helped them heal. But one thing that it was very, very clear is that the women end up working or participating or volunteering exactly in the area of what broke them. So you said yourself that you know, we started working with this foundation, and it's like, I'm telling you, Wendy, I've spoken to so many people, but exactly what was your pain, whatever was the source of pain, ends up becoming the purpose. So when you know that based on research, it is so helpful when you are in pain, before you became a thriver, to start seeing the potential of what could come out from this experience. I read a book from Dr. John DeMartini. It's called The Gratitude Effect. And are you familiar with him?
I am, yep.
He's amazing. So he was traveling to, I believe, to Australia, and he landed there on September 11th. And he went to the Qatar, in the airport, in the plane, you know, in that area, you know, when you're first class. And he said the first thing that he did was to take a piece of paper and a pen and write, what are the possible good things that could come out of it? And I thought it was amazing because it had just happened. I mean, everybody was glued to the TV in shock, you know, not knowing what was happening, how this was happening. And he decided to say, okay, within this nightmare, there are blessings. And I want to figure out, what are the possibilities? What are the possible blessings? And in a way, when you have this attitude throughout your adversities, throughout life, because they come, we can't run away from them. It is it's very interesting because even now that I'm going through what I'm going through, and I'm thinking, what could be the possible good things? Because in every bad thing, there's something good hidden. There's some blessing hidden, and
well, yeah. Definitely. I 100% agree with you. And I often say to people, give me a situation, I promise you I can find the silver lining. No matter what it is, even if it's somebody on their deathbed, there's always something, good that comes out of, whether it's bringing the family together or them reflecting on, life, or sharing a story with somebody, or whatever it might be. And so, yeah, it's very powerful, gratitude. And I was a little naive a few years back, and I used to think it was a bit wishy-washy. I'd been brought up in a very kind of more scientific type family, and anything sort of, do affirmations and gratitude, I used to think it was a bit, okay, that's a bit strange. And anyway, once I got into doing this neuroscience resilience, I dived into the research and I had a look at what was around. And to my surprise, there were actually quite a lot of research articles on gratitude, because neuroscientists have actually proven that gratitude can actually change the way your brain neurons are mapped. So there's lots of different scenarios of it. So, for example, if you've got I think they say if you've got like a negative thought, if you then come up with 5 gratitudes, that will counterbalance that one negative thought. And so they've done lots of research into what do you need to do in the positive to offset the negative. So now I'm a big believer in gratitude because it's scientifically proven. So all about the data. Yeah.
So it's very interesting. So I did this research not at all from a scientific desire. I'm not at all into the science. I am much more into the woo-woo, I'm much more in that world. But I needed to see for myself that my hunch was right. I was going into this research saying to myself, this is what I think is the case. But maybe I'm wrong and I need to go and find out. I went just to prove what I thought was going to happen. But I'm not at all into, I'm not a science. I don't care about the numbers, it's funny about the emotion. So it's interesting. So tell us now about the neuroscience of resilience. I just read this book. I don't know if you have read it. Did you read Grit?
No, I've seen that one, but I haven't yet got that one. I'll have to try it if you recommend it.
Yes, and this is based on science, and she's a doctorate and I think that her research was on grit and resilience and perseverance, and it's fascinating. So definitely, it's up your alley. I like the book a lot, but it's up your alley.
It's great. And you know how you said that, you don't necessarily rely on the science. It's interesting because often once you actually, something clicks for you, like it has for you, there is science behind it. You just aren't aware of it. And so it's like, when people say they have a gut sense of something, there's actually a proof that there's a link between your gut and the way your brain, like there's an axis, a gut and a brain axis. So, whenever you sort of think, oh, my gut feeling's telling me no, it's probably your brain also impacting that, and you probably need to listen to it. And so, some people will go, I just go off my gut feeling, but in actual fact, there's probably some science behind that. And so that's what I find really fascinating. When I did my first degree, it was an applied science one. And as I said, my dad was into science and engineering and that, so he was constantly talking about physics and things. And as much as I didn't like it at the time, I think a little bit of that rubbed off. And so I always like to look at how you can apply science in the real world. And the second one I did was human resources, and it kind of is a nice match, the science and the human resources, because you pull together how is this actually going to relate in the workplace or, in relationships or other things. And so I just find it fascinating. And neuroscience is such a new thing in the greater scheme of sciences. It's really only been the last 20 years or so where they're really making leaps and bounds into it. And they'll be the first to admit that they've only scratched the surface. And a lot of neuroscientists call the brain the most complex item, thing in the world, in the universe, because it's just so complicated and has so many layers to it that they're still getting their head around. And I don't claim to be a neuroscientist at all. It's not my thing, but I certainly have appreciated the learnings of it and then been able to apply them to real life. So that's what I teach. And it's amazing. If you can tap into what's going on up here, you can change so many things in your life, even others. I've been reading up about influence and EQ and how you can change the mood of a room by the way you act. And there's just really interesting things you can do, and short-term and long-term as well. So I often teach little neuro hacks that people can do in the moment to deal with stress or other things.
So tell us, because I think that, first of all, we are a generation riddled with stress and anxiety. Right, between the social media and between work stress, and now with the pandemic, I mean, we're all a ball of nerves for whatever reasons, right? So give us some tips and tell us a little bit about the science and how you have developed ways to calm the nerves, ease the stress. Tell us about it.
Sure. Well, what I first usually start with is just doing a really basic of what's going on. And a lot of people have heard some of these things before. You might have heard of the flight or fright, flight or fight syndrome, where people are either hardwired to, deal with the danger or run away. But there's also freeze and faint as well. So you can have, a combination of things which happens. And what's really going on inside your brain is that it's realizing that there's a potential danger. Now, it was fine when we were back in caveman times, and you might have heard the story of the saber-toothed tiger, and yes, you had to be ready for whatever was going to leap out at you from behind the bushes. But we don't need that level of warning system now, but we still have it. And so what happens is social fears and internal fears and other more soft fears actually can cause as much of a stress as something like, seeing a speeding car coming towards you. And what's happened is that we've become, a lot of us, chronically stressed because we're constantly on edge from all these different things which are happening. And what happens is you have the front area of your brain is what they call the prefrontal cortex, and I like to call it your smart brain. That's sort of the driver of the CEO, I'm in charge part of your brain. And then you have sort of further back the amygdala, which is more the emotional side of the brain. And what happens is that when your brain recognizes there's a threat, the amygdala takes over and it almost shuts down this sensible part of us. So I often have people say to me, but Wendy, I know what to do in, certain situations, and, I'm pretty good at being resilient and problem solving and all of that. And I say, yeah, but how are you when you're stressed? Because I can 100% guarantee you that all your normal thinking patterns and your the intelligence that comes from how you're dealing with things up here is going to be affected, because that's the chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you need to do is you need to learn, firstly, when you're going through that sort of, reaction, and then helping yourself calm so that you get this working more, so you can actually start making some rational decisions and think about things in a more logical way and deal with it in a more, we'll call it adult way, instead of a childish yelling back at the person or, storming off in a huff. So that's the first part, is recognizing it's actually happened, and then trying to calm yourself, and then trying to use longer term techniques which will reset how you're thinking about things and how you're going to react.
Mm-hmm.
So
But how are you, when every time that it happens in real life and in real time, those are not the times for you to start assessing and analyzing, because you were freaking out at that moment. So when do you realize, okay, this is a sign that I'm starting to freak out? What Sunday night when my husband passed out, we just got up the stairs. He passed out. and he fell, and then he went head first towards the stairs, and it was hard because he's heavier, right? His body was,
yeah.
so I had to grab him not to fall down the stairs. I have to tell you something. I was freaking out, but I was freaking out.
Yeah, yeah, that's understandable. I mean, you would
at that moment there was no filter. Like, oh, I'm freaking out right now. I have to stop freaking out so that I can let my brain think. There was none of that. It was like, call 911, scream at the kids, clean the vomit. It was a mess.
All right, so here's a good comparison then. If you had that situation happen and the person was a paramedic or a doctor or a nurse, they would react in a completely different way, you would assume. I mean, these are a bit different when it's a person, in your life, but what would happen there is that they would be more resilient in that situation and actually go, I've seen this before, I know how to deal with this, I know what I need to do. And so you would find that they would more quickly get their emotions, if there were any involved with that, which you imagine there would be, they'll get them under check quicker. And that's what I try to do. So I'm actually giving people the tools so that when that happens next time or something similar happens, they can realize, I've seen this. I do realize that this is, me acting like I acted before didn't really help. I need to, look at this a different way and try something different. And so resilience is one of those things that you can always learn, but you need to be constantly practicing it because it's a soft skill and it's not something you can go off and do a half-day course on and all of a sudden you're resilient. So you've just got to continually be aware of those and learn what your triggers are. And if you know that going in heavy traffic is likely to make you stressed and get you on edge, then, if you just kept going day after day to work and getting stressed every time and arriving in a big, like a stress head, then people would be kind of looking, well, why do you keep doing it that way? And whereas if you realize that's what triggers you, you can go, okay, well, I'm going to, prepare for this better. I'm going to leave a bit earlier. I'm going to go the scenic route. I'm going to have some calming music playing in the car. I'm going to listen to talkback radio or whatever it is so you can be prepared. And resilience is one of those things where, you'd all have a group of friends or maybe even office colleagues or wherever you are situated where there's always that one person who seems to have it under control. And that's a resilient person because, they're the ones that people turn to in a situation where there's drama or there's an emergency. They look to that person to lead them. And that's what I want for clients, especially ones, in the workplace, to be able to be that person.
Yes. So very interesting. I wanted to talk to you about something that you mentioned earlier in our conversation. And I wasn't sure I was going to bring this up, but I'm going to bring this up. You mentioned
I'll talk about anything.
You mentioned that you only get what you can handle. That you get what you can handle. And in my interviews, I asked a person that she also, I brought her back. I interviewed her twice. I brought her back to the group. Her name is Elisa Bulow. It was a fascinating interview. But I asked her that question in my first private interview with her. And I said, you believe that we get tested and anything that we get, we can handle? And the reason that I asked that question is because it's something that people say, right? People say, if you got it, it's because you can handle. But I never believed it. And I'll tell you, I didn't believe it because I'm pretty resilient. I'm very strong. But in the times that I was really, really tested in my life, I knew I didn't have what it took at that moment. I didn't have what it took. And so I wanted to know from Elisa, and Elisa told me that she does not agree with this comment. I was so relieved because I needed somebody to validate me. She didn't know where I stood on this, but she said something very interesting. She said, no, you were tested outside of what you can handle because we are tested in life. We go through adversity in life in order to grow and expand and become stronger, more resilient, calmer, more patient. So you were tested in those areas beyond what you can handle. And the test is this growth, and the pain is the growth. When as you grow and as you learn X, Y, and Z, whatever it is that you are, going through right now, you feel pain. Some people will succeed in learning the lessons. Some people will not, and they probably will be tested again in those areas throughout their lives until that become part of who they are. The reason I decided to bring this up is because I think that what you were saying now about resilience, and I'm a big believer that you can't learn resilience from a book. You need to go through adversity, and you need to overcome. You need to go through a difficult experience, and you need to also want to put into practice the lessons that you learned the previous time. But
no. Look, I get where you're coming from with that. I think from the way I interpret it is that when I say, you're given whatever you can deal with, the thing is, in that situation, people are dealing with it in their way by growing, by learning, by overcoming. And so that is still being able to deal with it. It just might take longer, but I will deal with it because that's humans are actually a lot more resilient than you realize. And I've had a lot of people over the years say to me, I don't think I could cope with what you've been through. And I always turn around and I say, you'd be surprised, because I've met so many people in this journey, not just transplant patients, but all sorts of people open up. And, that my mum and her three sisters all had breast cancer, and only one of my oldest auntie is still around. And so I've, had a lot of exposure to cancer as well, and lots of different things that people open up and tell me about. And I realized that they all thought at the time they weren't going to be able to handle it as well. And, they probably in their minds, I think they didn't handle it very well on certain days. I mean, I had days where, everything was too hard and you want to get out of bed. But I still did handle it in the end and push. And so when people talk about resilience, often they talk about an older concept of bouncing back. And I like to say, well, I don't want to bounce back to where I was. I want to push through the adversity. So I define resilience as pushing through the adversity, no matter what. So that, I guess, is my interpretation of that. So you handle it on as best you can on the day, and then you handle it a bit better the next day, and then you might have another bad day, but you'll eventually get into a situation where you can handle it, and you may need help. I mean, I think this is a lot of people forget that handling it doesn't mean handling it on your own. Handling it can be reaching out for support and getting others to do that, because we're hardwired to want to collaborate with others and connect. And so it's really important that you do that when you're going through something tough. And I don't know what your research showed on that too, but I imagine that most of the people who were very good at dealing with stuff had good support networks, or at least a few people that were there for them.
100%. They all had either a family member or a friend or a therapist or a support group. 100%. They didn't do it alone. I just read a book called Ikigai. Ikigai is are you familiar? It's a Japanese. It's when you work with your purpose. When your passion is what you love, is what you're here and you're meant to do. And exactly. So in part of this book, they went to Okinawa, which is an island in Japan, where there are the most centenarians per capita. And they wanted to find out how they lived so long. So it's fascinating. So first of all, is they all see friends, spend friends, they have a community, but every single day. They don't go a day that they don't get together with friends and spend time with friends. And I was like, every day? I mean, I'm lucky if once a month I have time to, you go from work and family obligations, but every single day they spend time with friends.
That's
honestly, they talk about their diet, and the exercise was very interesting because they don't do any no weightlifting, no harsh exercises. It's like more the,
Movement.
movement, but slow movement. Salute. You do this. The salute is here. She does it with her husband, with Tom. Kinjong. How do you say that? But all of those, I can go, and all of those very slow movements, and I was like, wow, they're fit, they're healthy, and they're not going crazy. They're eating a good diet. They eat. It said there that they eat until their bellies is only 80% full. Never to fill your belly 100%. And then between all of that, they were able to live until 100. But there's no question, right? Here is salute.
Ah, there she goes.
Qigong.
I'm glad she put the way to say it there.
How to say it, yes. Thanks, salute. So, so it's fascinating because we are all the time in search for quality of life, because at the end of the day, we can't live to 100 if we are so stressed, so broken, so unable to deal with the things and the tests that life brings to us.
Well, I agree. And the stress levels, because I went through so much stress, I was actually a bit worried about how it had impacted my body. So one of the things I did was research the effects of long-term chronic stress, because I was just thinking, well, what impacts that going to have? And, I would always, in the back of my mind, likened anyone who'd seemed to get some real serious illness or disease always seemed to have a lot on their plate at the time, or some big incident that had kind of been the tipping point or whatever it was. And so I was very mindful of that. And what I came across was lots and lots of articles around oxidative stress, because I was typing in the word stress into the PubMed, which is basically the global database of where everyone puts their research articles. And I kept coming up with this, I kept seeing this word oxidative stress popping up all the time. And when I typed it in, there was over 200,000 research citations about it. So I started looking into it, and it's where your body cells, a bit like, when you have an apple and it starts to go a bit brown and a bit like that. Well, that's what gradually happens to all your cells in your body, and that's what shows inflammation and aging. And there's just so many diseases and illnesses relating to your cells breaking down and inflammation and all of that. And so, the resilience of your actual body itself can be really affected by, the toxins and where the environment you're in and the stress levels you're dealing with and all of that. So, it's another part of my business that I deal with. But it's, I find it fascinating how the stress that you can get from an external trigger or something that is up here can then lead to cell damage. And we have some control over what's going on here. So if we can change this, you can really hopefully improve your body and the way you deal with things too. So it's a really interesting link.
Do you know about any research about breathing techniques? Because now I don't know if this was something that's going on for a while, but I definitely was like probably living under a rock. Suddenly I see breathing therapies and learning how to breathe all over the place. And I'm like, where was that 10 years ago? I hadn't heard about all of this. I knew that I was breathing wrong because I never, my belly was going the opposite way and I wasn't. But tell me about breathing, because I think
it's a fascinating subject as well. And I can tell you so much about it. So, one of the things which I did not long after having my lung transplant was I went and got singing lessons, not to become a singer, but because I wanted to learn proper diaphragmatic breathing. So I found a technical singing teacher, and I was with him for about 4 years learning how to do deep breaths, because I knew I only had about 64% lung capacity. So I knew I needed to use my lungs as fully as possible. So that's one element. But breathing is really interesting when it comes to the way your body's reacting to things. So just at the back of your head here, sort of at the top part of your neck there. It's this little thing called the Prebotzinger complex, and what it does is it actually monitors your breathing. So it doesn't change it or regulate, it just keeps an eye on it. So what it does is it picks up if you're doing shallow breathing or deep breathing or just normal breathing, and it responds based on that. So if, like most people, you're doing really shallow breathing or really stress breathing, if something's happening, it will pick up on that and it'll go, oh, we're under attack, I need to do something, and it will start releasing some of the the stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and it's your muscles up, cause the upset tummy and all of that. So if you know that this little thing here is monitoring, you can actually trick it into realizing that you're no longer under threat. And there's a couple of really simple techniques that you can do to do that. And it's like a circuit breaker. So one I like to call the double sniff. I'm yet to come up with a better name. It's something that a neuroscientist over in the States at one of the universities talks about. And we can do it together if you want,
Yes.
and people watching. So what you do, so when you do a sniff, like a deep sniff, you kind of do and you breathe in and it comes in through your mouth and through your nose. But you do it like a double one. So it's kind of like you do one and then the other one almost immediately on top of it. And it's such an unusual breathing way of doing things that it kind of makes this go, hang on a minute, what's happening here? And it's like I call it a circuit breaker. But so if you're ever in a stressful situation, maybe you're in a meeting or you're dealing with a stressful family member, I don't know, a situation that's got you riled up, we'll do it together. So I'll show you first and then we can try one. So you go like that, and you're breathing in twice. And sometimes you have to repeat it. You might have to do it 2 or 3 times. But you'll find often your shoulders will drop after doing it, and you'll just want to take an even deeper breath. And I've actually had people who've said they feel a bit emotional when they do it. But so maybe give it a go and just see. But just a little bit of practice to get. So it's sort of
So the first one is a little deeper.
Yeah, you can do it the first one fairly deep and then do another one after that will kind of almost fill your lungs fully. But it's like a double sniff, and it's a weird thing to do, but it can really help in the moment. And it's what I call a stealth neuro hack, because I'm mindful that if people are sitting in a meeting, they can't just start going off and doing yoga on the side or meditation or listening to music. Like, it's just not practical. So I teach things which you can do sneaky. So that's one of them. The other one is just changing the way your brain is focused, because if you start helping your brain to focus, what happens is that this prefrontal cortex starts trying to take over, and that in reverse shuts down this emotional part. So one of the techniques might be to focus on, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, and you can do those sorts of things, and it distracts you from where you're at. So you can be doing that in a meeting, just looking around as someone's talking and looking for, 5 things that you can see and just silently saying them to yourself. And that can be enough as well, just to, it takes less than a minute. And you could be feeling a lot better just off the back of doing that. The other thing is, if you're out in nature, our brains are wired to look for patterns. So our brain's actually a bit lazy, so it likes to do simpler things. And patterns is really relaxing for the brain, because they're not looking at unusual things and having to try and work out what it is. There's a pattern to it. So they call them fractal patterns. And you'll notice, like, if you are in nature, that you'll see leaves and flowers, they all have the little petals all in little circles, and your fronds of, ferns all go out in a very neat sort of pattern. And if you can spend time looking for patterns in nature, that is a really, really calming effect. So there's heaps of them I've got, but they're just 3 of them.
So like looking at clouds, and I do that sometimes in nature a lot with trees. I see, when I was hiking with my husband in Georgia, I even took a bunch of pictures, because I was seeing an old man, I was seeing a mother with a child in nature. It wasn't really carvings, but I could see, and we were then like going one tree after the other looking for So is that what you mean by
Yes,
starting?
sort of. It's more repetitive patterns. So it would be more those clouds where it had like layers of, the fluffy bits in a pattern per se. But what you're doing in that instance is actually focusing on things which are taking your mind off other stresses. So it's it's a version of meditation. And again, I was one of those ones that was like, oh, meditation. I put that in the bucket with gratitude and all those other things, woohoo things, as you call them, not realizing that, of course, that is also very scientifically researched as well. So, it just goes to show you not to dismiss things offhand before actually realizing that there is some truth to it. So, yeah.
But I want to tell you something, that in a way you gave me a gift. You don't even know it. Because when I went through some big problems about 7-8 years ago, that was when I really felt broken. And I've been always resilient, and it caught me by surprise on how broken I felt. I then decided that I was going to start a new company. The reason that I did that was because I wanted to be busy, and everything that I had done for 20 years beforehand, I knew how to do it with my eyes closed. So I put myself in a situation that I would be very, very busy, not to think about my problems. But at the same time, I chose to do something that I didn't know much about. And I think that without being conscious, what I was trying to do is give the attention to my front part of my brain. So I would be focused on learning and doing and growing in order to shut down that stress that I was feeling. So maybe I was doing it without knowledge that I was really trying to, medicate that high level of stress.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think a lot of us use distractions of work and that to take our mind off things. The problem comes where you take on too much and you go into overwhelm, or the work ends up being the stress, and then it's not a good thing. I was reading something really interesting the other day where they were talking about, you've probably heard before where people talk about you're an expert once you've done 10,000 hours or something. And they were saying that if you look at like top athletes, or, whether it's a violinist or surgeon or whoever it might be, top of their game, yes, they've probably had their 10,000 hours, but they've deliberately chosen to practice for 10,000 hours. But what a lot of people don't realize is that they've also deliberately chosen to rest for 10,000, maybe 12,000 hours, because what's happening is you can't, as a violinist, just be playing 24/7. They know they need to rest their fingers, maybe do some finger exercises and just, do other things for a while. An athlete knows they can't just keep, running up and down the field with the ball or jumping the high jump all the time. They know they need to go and get, a massage and treatments and just have days off and all of that. So it's a really good thing to apply in your own life as well, so that if you're one of those people that pushes yourself and takes pride in working hard and doing a really good job, and that, be deliberate about that, but also be deliberate about resting as well, because you need the counterbalance in order to do well when you're working. So I always suggest that.
You were spot on, and that is probably the mistake that I was doing, because I did get to that point of complete stress and overwhelm from overworking. So you're spot on. We're reaching 8:57. I could talk to you for forever, but I want to ask anybody who's here, if anybody has any specific questions for Wendy. She is going to be inside the group, and she's also going to answer to those who are in the Heal with Gold group. But if you have any questions right now, please put on the question on the chat. And let's see here. Gina, I'm already in Japan. I had tickets to go to Japan before the pandemic, and we had to cancel them. And I think that has been the saddest part of the pandemic for me, because I'm fascinated about Japanese culture.
Yeah, they have some amazing ways they approach life, don't they? And just some of their terms, which just capture perfectly,
Yes.
like the name of your thing. That I mean, it's just so clever. Taking broken things and making them beautiful, and a new thing. I mean, yeah, they've just nailed it with some of their terms. But yeah, it's on my bucket list too. I think I mentioned my top 3 of places to go. Japan.
What are your other 2?
Antarctica, which I tell people, and they kind of go, "Really, you're going there as a lung transplant patient?" But we do a
I'm
safe
telling
version.
you should talk to Sean. You should definitely talk to Sean.
Yeah, well, I think it'd be great. And then I'd also like to go to Spain. My husband and I are sort of foodies, so we've been to France and Italy, but we didn't quite make it to Spain last time. So there's a few on the bucket list. And you do have a bucket list as a transplant patient when you've got short life expectancy. In fact, you actually have a few bucket lists. You do one and then you make up another one.
Yeah, my husband tells me that I have a, how does he say? Because he says my bucket is so big already, it's not a bucket. It's like, I don't know. He has a term for it because I have so much planned for my life.
Yeah, I think that's good.
This person is asking for books to read on neuroscience.
Okay. Oh, well, yeah, it depends on what angle you're coming from. I'll pop a few recommendations in the Facebook page, group, so you can have a little look at some of the ones which I've read that I've got a lot out of. There's a few out there, some better than others. And sometimes even the ones with by neuroscientists, they can sometimes be a bit too high level and they're not really practical ones. I'm more a practical person. So yeah, I'll put a few of them into the little group and people can check them out. Have a look.
Fantastic. So I just want to leave the group with a few things to remember. We'll hopefully have the show on Sunday. I'm not planning to cancel it. February 24th, I have planned an amazing summit. We're going to have a marathon from 3 p.m. till 9:30. We have 6 amazing speakers. Alex Katz is going to come back and help us exercise and stretch in between. I'm going to ask you to sign up in order to participate in this summit. The videos are going to be available only for 24 hours. So, this is going to be afterwards a bonus, a gift that I'm going to be giving out. So it's not going to just stay forever in the group. Please make plans to come on February 24th. There's nothing like coming live and participating and being able to put comments and being able to ask questions. And it's a whole different ballgame. I'm getting a lot of thank you. And then I also just please keep praying for my husband if you can. We're not out of the woods. So if I am a little bit absent, please understand that that's what's happening. But know that I love you all and I'm so grateful. Wendy, I am so grateful for your time. Do you have anything that you want to leave the group with?
Well, I guess one of the things I often say to people is that it's not a matter of if you'll have adversity, it's when. And so if you can be a bit more prepared for it and I guess ready to deal with it and understand that no matter what you face, there are tools that can help you. It just gives you real peace of mind knowing that, what's out there and what's in here is often all you need. And if you can get the right support, then no matter how hard it seems on the day, you can get through it, push through.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you, Wendy, for your wisdom and your personal story. We all appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for participating. I'm so happy that I made it through. Have a wonderful, wonderful end of week for everybody.
Thanks for having me on.
Sure.